Is that legal?
I will make it legal.
Where do you get this bureaucratic bull?
You have all the character references of a politician.
Intelligence has nothing to do with politics.
This president is not above the law.
If the dirty air don't get you, the politicians will.
The last remnants of the old republic have been swept away.
These orders have forced us to declare independence.
Welcome to Grounds of Expediency, Hard to Starboard Radio, live. Thought I'd go live. There's some stuff that's been happening. A little bit was talked about Friday night, and it got me thinking. So I set up this stream, impromptu. Thanks for being here, guys. We're simulcasting on United Spacers Alliance and Grounds of Expediency channels. If you're not subbed to Grounds of Expediency channel, please do so. As I said, some stuff went down on the channel in real life, and it got me thinking, decided to go live. We're in an election year, guys, but it goes beyond the election. It goes beyond the parties, even the ideologies. The standard ideologies, right versus left. And I'm going to show you where I'm going with that. There's a social experiment going on right now in the comments from the spacing, and it's really interesting. It's one of the things that got me thinking. We're going to go into that as well. When you look at the thumbnail, you versus them, I'm not talking about you versus the other party, the other side of the aisle. Because what I'm talking about goes beyond political affiliation and the political ideologies that people think they have. Like, oh, I'm a conservative. Well, what does that mean? Oh, I'm a libertarian. What does that mean? I'm an anarcho-capitalist. Well, what does that mean? People don't even know what it means. And this all ties into some other stuff on the thumbnail. Gary Cooper from The Fountainhead. One of, if the only, film adaptation of the novel by Ayn Rand. And John Hurt from the 1984 adaptation in 1984. I believe it was actually in the year, wasn't it? Let's look that up really quick. Adaptation of the great George Orwell novel. 1984 IMDb. Yeah, came out in 1984, so pretty cool. If you haven't seen that, lower budget film, but not a bad flick. Hey, that's a great alternative factory selection right there. So is The Fountainhead. It's a different kind of film, especially for the time it came out. What year was that? Like 1949, I think it was. Let's look that up as well. The Fountainhead movie. Yeah, 1949. Here's one scary thing about that. About 8 years ago, Zack Snyder expressed interest in adapting The Fountainhead. Keep him the fuck away from that, right? But share the link out there, guys. This is Hard to Starboard Radio. You can listen along. Nothing to show on the screen. Sent the link out there. Possibly have a guest on. It's not going to be a long one, but I want to do these occasionally. It's something you can go back and listen to later, or listen as you're cleaning your house, driving along. If you have a set of AirPods or earbuds, if you're shopping for groceries, whatever, you can just listen along. We've got some people in the chat. We've got Melissa Lord, first ever member of the channel, The Listening Fat, and Corey Cochran. I know it's Sunday at noon in Central Time, but again, wanted to go ahead and go live. So what we're talking about here in the us versus them guys, again, it's not political party. It's not even, if you want to say conservative versus liberal, right versus left. It's not even that. It's about conformity versus individuality versus nonconformity, right? I told that story on the spacing in the Grounds of Expediency segment. We had our PAC conference call. They do it once or twice a year. In an election year, we're probably going to have several. And the two people that they had that were actual employees of the company representing both sides, you know, like the Biden side and then the Republican side, they were just so, they were so compromised, both sides. Like, obviously the Biden side wasn't going to admit that it was a complete shit show, right? Of course, she had to make a couple of comments to make it sound like she had been giving some kind of concession there, that she was being reasonable, but it didn't go far enough. The Republican side, that guy didn't even go far enough. It's like, dude, like, everyone is so conditioned to be politically correct that it gets in the way of sharing the truth. And it happens a lot. Like, you want to compromise. You want to come to an agreement, but you don't want to let the prevention of truth being shared get in the way of that. And that's what they were doing. It was just ridiculous. You could just sense through the conference call, through the online meeting, just from several hundred participants, just the apathy toward the conversation after probably 10 minutes, because it was just boring and pointless, because no one was wanting to confront the truth that what was going on up on that podium was stupid and irrational and unacceptable. No one even wanted to say that. You had some people in the chat that probably don't care about their career saying more than they should have. Well, their questions weren't addressed, of course. There were some sensible questions asked, and no one answered those that were on the panel. So you get that, right? It's us versus them. Us, we, you, whoever. You want to be an individual. You want to be self-determining. You want to be free. And then you got the people that want to conform. And that's where the fact that it doesn't matter what party you're in, even what political ideology you're in, which side you're on, conformity happens across the board, because some people think that that's the way to move forward. We saw it with the Republican Party back in 2016, right? And you guys know that I'm not the biggest Trump fan, but am I going to vote for him? Did I vote for him last time? Hell yeah, I did, because voting is not about finding the perfect ideal candidate. It's about voting for the lesser of many evils. That's the way it is. When you don't vote for the lesser of many evils, then you're perpetuating the evil. That's just the way that it is. That's how the Democratic portion of our republic works, guys. That's the way that it works. Apathy doesn't get you anywhere. So, conformity versus individuality. Guess what else this ties into? It ties into the spacing. Friday night. Now it is like the number 3 or 4 spacing and or live stream on the channel of all time. It just took off, I guess because of the Dune aspect of it, maybe catching an algorithm. I always post this stuff in different Discord servers, in Facebook groups, places like that. And there is a huge thread going on in an anti-Disney Star Wars Facebook group right now. I haven't even gone back and looked. For me, that's happened a few other times. It's almost like you like the match, the explosion happens and you just walk away. That one GIF meme that's out there. That's kind of what happens when I do that stuff. But it's funny that it's happening because people in an anti-Disney Star Wars group are like defending it. And I went over it, and we're not going to go into it on this stream, why I think Dune is leftist. You can go back and watch the spacing for that. But it's more about the consistency than, hey, this film is this. That's what a lot of people didn't get, that the spacing topic was about where is the consistency between criticizing certain movies and not applying the same set of rules to Dune. We haven't seen that over the last week. We just haven't. So to step out of the box and say, hey, I feel this way about this movie, is showing nonconformity. And a lot of people in the comments are like, wow, you're right. And I'm glad someone is saying that, right? But then you got people coming in saying stupid stuff like, Star Wars is leftist too, so the joke's on you. So you got people from all sides, right? You got the people that think George made Star Wars like a leftist resistance thing and all that. Then you got people, quote unquote, on our side defending it just because every 3 or 4 months there's one movie that's selected as this is the movie that we have to support as an alternative that's actually good. I said it on Friday night, the Spider-Man No Way Homes, the Top Guns, I can't even think of what the last one was. And I don't care. You want to go watch that, great. But you're not being consistent, and we will point that out. So if you go there right now, there's probably 70 comments at this point. And people are just, I've gone at them a few times. I've had to go at some people. They're going back and forth. But initially, some people that regularly listen to the channel, Friday nights, they're commenting. And then some people I've never heard of before are like, wow, that's a lot of good information you're giving us here. Making some points. And one guy's like, hey, here's a $10 super thanks. I think it's the second super thanks I've ever gotten. So that was kind of awesome. So the point here, guys, you've seen the meme before of the fork that's all bent up saying being unique doesn't mean you're useful. That's correct. So the same can apply to being a nonconformist. Not conforming just to not conform is not necessarily useful. But when you do it the right way, it is. So, for example, go back to the election, right? 2016. You can argue for or against it, but did the Republican Party need something different? Need a nonconformist? Probably so, because Donald Trump wiped the floor with Hillary Clinton. And again, the pollsters, they should have predicted his victory, but they didn't. Because to them, it was a foregone conclusion that Hillary was going to win. This bombastic, flamboyant apprentice guy, there's no way he could win the presidency of the United States, leader of the free world, right? Well, he did. And again, certain publications predicted that victory because, guess what? They stepped outside the box and they didn't conform. They conducted their polls by asking, who do you think your neighbor is going to vote for? So you've got conformity versus nonconformity versus self-determination. We decided we're going to talk about Dune for what we're seeing it as. And then, hey, what are people saying about these other movies and what's different? about the philosophies and all that. Star Wars. George has said that the original Wookiee battle was going to be kind of like, and then the Ewok one that actually got made in Return of the Jedi was going to be kind of like the concept of the Viet Cong fighting with low technology and all that. Okay, great. He made the point. He made the movie, but that's not what the film was about. We know the philosophy of Star Wars, right? The timeless, heroic adventure. Power corrupts, and fighting against tyranny. That's a timeless concept. You don't have to be of a certain political persuasion to fight against tyranny. You just don't. I think if you're a good person, you want to oppose tyranny. And you want to promote individuality, and I'll get into that later. So back to the thumbnail. You've got Gary Cooper on the thumbnail. He was in the film adaptation of The Fountainhead. If you've never read that novel, go out there and get it. Because a lot of what's happening in that novel is happening right now. This novel, when was the novel published? I think it was like in the 30s, guys. I should know this right off the top of my head. 1943, right? So in the middle of the Second World War. But cancel culture, all that stuff, from a high level, about an architect that wants to do things his way. And he gets pushback, right? There's a member of the media that writes a column on architecture. Well, he tries to cancel him. He has a girlfriend / lover there that goes back and forth between supporting him and trying to chuck him under the bus. That column writer is basically using cancel culture against him. It's all there just because he wants to step outside the box. And what's funny about this novel, about this, even the movie, is it doesn't mention politics at all. That's what's brilliant about it. It's just about, hey, here's a situation in life, and here's what's happening. So you could either call it an analogy, or you could call it an experience, right, with two different opposing philosophies and ideologies. Someone who wants to be self-determining and someone who does not. What's crazy is another real life this time mirror of what's happening now. So the film and the movie, the book, they all came out 1949. The movie, well, the reviews start coming out, right? And the Daily Worker, which is a communist newspaper, publication, whatever. I think it came up in Seinfeld when was it Elaine that had like the supposed communist boyfriend or whatever, like, oh look, he wears work shirts and all that. And he subscribes to the Daily Worker. I think it came up in that episode, but listen to what the Daily Worker said and tell me where you've heard this now in 2024. The communist newspaper Daily Worker deemed The Fountainhead, this is the film they're talking about, to be an openly fascist movie. So there you go. And again, politics don't even come up in the book or movie openly, yet the commie rag wants to call it openly fascist. You need to see this movie or get the book, guys. The movie is, one of your typical 1949 style movies. But from what I've read, and early on, Rand, she supported the movie. She wrote the screenplay. But later on, because it was out and that's why she's supporting it. But later on, she said, oh, next time I want to be able to edit it and all that other stuff. And she'd never sign over rights when she was alive to another studio to adapt one of her books. But see the movie anyway, read the book, guys, because what's happening in this book is happening now. For the last, I'd say, 15 to 20 years, even going back to the Clinton administration, they're trying to erode individuality from our lives. Think about what happened. Oh, look what it is. It's March 10th, almost exactly 4 years ago. They want conformity. They want you to get in line. They want you to obey orders. And what does all that lead to? It leads to collectivism. And you know, here we're the no compromise anti-collectivists, because that's what we are. We talked about that on the spacing as well, like the greater good. Well, who's to decide what the greater good is? One of Rand's primary philosophies is rational self-determination, or as I call myself, rational individualism, right? You can be an individualist to a certain point, right? To a certain rational point. But compelled altruism, redistribution of wealth, that goes against individuality. It's theft. The whole hashtag taxation is theft thing. So what you see happening in this novel, and even in real life around the novel, has been happening really hardcore since I'd say 2018, but starting during the Obama administration, really. But a lot of this does go back to the Clinton administration. People don't realize this, but what Obama did was he used executive power to expand some of the relaxing of laws around fiduciary duty that were signed into law during the Clinton administration. And that's what led to ESG. So Obama's further relaxing of those using executive power is really what led to ESG investment. And what that means is, if companies don't have a fiduciary duty to ensure that their company's profitable for stockholders, for investors, then they can take money from the ESG firms and do stupid shit that won't create a return and not have to be held accountable for it. That's why you may ask yourself, like, gosh, why are all these companies doing all this stupid stuff? Yeah, let's hire 100 people, make a diversity department while we're bleeding money at the box office. It doesn't even have to be entertainment. It could be retail or anything like that. We're losing money, but let's add a 100-person team of DIE is what I call it. It's because they're not having to be held accountable, and these ESG investment companies are giving them the money, because guess what's behind that? These ESG investment companies have a long-term plan to move the needle toward collectivism. Think about the country with the highest population in the world, guys. Thanks for joining the stream. I see Mike, an all-around arbiter, and the nuisance bird. If you're just now joining, go back to the start, watch it on 1.75 speed, and catch up to us. Again, this is Hard to Starboard Radio. I'm going to try and do these every so often for 30 to 45 minutes when a topic comes up. So it's about individuality versus collectivism. Conformity, collectivism, the greater good. And who is to decide what the greater good is? Well, if you look in these stupid, quote-unquote, utopian science fiction novels, it's some computer, right? The computer will decide. There's a central computer that decides. We've seen it in Star Trek, too. And it's always usually in a negative light. Let the computer decide what is the utopia, right? And they will plan it for us. We're starting to see that now too. I just saw an article, I don't know, like less than an hour ago, and I need to check into the veracity of it, but the US is looking into some new fighters, jet fighters, that would be robotic, no pilot, and would obey every order. The top comment on that post was, oh, so there's no pilot that has taken an oath to uphold the Constitution, and thus the AI will take any order it receives. That's a little bit scary when you think about it. When you think about what has been happening over the last 15, 20 years when it comes to the government, to the federal government in the United States of America, and what they've done. Look what happened at the State of the Union. The guy that yelled, taken into custody, right? First Amendment. If that had happened during George W. Bush's State of the Union, or God forbid, Trump's State of the Union, can you imagine the outrage, the outcry from the media? It would be immeasurable. They wouldn't shut up about it for up until the election. So how do you fight that? Well, you be consistent, guys. And it starts with what we're seeing in front of us, like takes on movies. This movie is quote unquote woke. This movie is one you should go out and see, right? Well, what are in these movies? What are in the source material of these movies, of the material that made the movies? Just like we did with Dune. Step outside the box and start looking at things for what they are. That's what we have to do. We don't have to be so desperate for a good new movie to come out. I was looking at Gary Cooper's filmography earlier this morning. He died in 1960, guys, or 61, somewhere around there. And right off the top of my head, I thought of like 3 films I'd like to see of his again. I think I have one of them on DVD, For Whom the Bell Tolls. I look at the filmography, I'm like, whoa, I've never heard of that one and that one and that one. So many films out there. Alternative Factory, guys, hundreds, thousands of films to watch, tens of thousands, right? When you start looking at what's being pushed as this is a movie we should see, because we want to show Hollywood, hey, you should make more of this. It doesn't line up. It doesn't make any sense. So you think that we support Dune, which, again, I don't think it's logical to support it anyway, but let's say it were a reasonable, non-woke, and the origins of it were apolitical and everything else. Yeah, let's support that. What if they made a new Star Wars movie? What if Kathleen Kennedy is fired and they made a new Star Wars movie that was faithful to the original, but they're still owned by Disney? What do you think they're doing there, guys? They're making enough money so that they can continue to fund the cause, the vision that they have for a new world. One film, one trilogy, one series of films is not going to change Hollywood. They're past the point of no return. The same goes, in my opinion, in all industries. It's a little bit too late. We should have stopped it when we could, but we didn't. We kept on keeping our heads in our phones and televisions and tablets and everything else. But there is a glimmer of hope because, as the great Andrew Breitbart said, politics are downstream from culture, right? And why is that? Because people are into culture first. Well, I'll take that to another level here. And the Fountainhead is the example, which again doesn't go into politics or doesn't mention politics directly. It's more of an analogy for it. Here's where I'll take it. Politics are downstream from self, right? You could talk about, wow, communism, socialism, any kind of collectivism is bad politically, but it's also bad for the soul. Think about those of us Gen Xers who grew up in the ass end of the Cold War. Think about, at that point in the early 80s, like how shitty Russia was. A lot of the pictures that came out of there, people looking depressed and downtrodden. And this is how people were living, guys. There were buildings about the size of my house, maybe 3 or 4 stories tall though, and they would have rooms all around the outside, kind of like a hotel, right? A boxy, brutalist architecture building. They'd have communal bathrooms and showers, and that's where people lived. And a lot of the people living in those structures were pulled from maybe their farmhouse or whatever, because guess what? That farm was nationalized by the Soviet Union. People are living that way. But guess what? There's equity, right? That erodes the soul, guys. So not only are politics downstream from culture, it's downstream from self, because people should start realizing that decisions made by themselves and the people that they put in power come from them. Every decision you make, not just at the polls, but in everything that you do, everything that you support, it perpetuates that power potentially. When you're not allowed to make a decision here and there, oh, not a big deal, you know. Let's vote for the mill. Let's vote for the new tax, the new municipal tax. They need to build a park. The kids need to play soccer, guys, and baseball. You know, I'm going to vote for that tax increase. That's part of conformity. Oh, there's a new state tax, statewide, 1.5% increase to make sure that we don't have a deficit. A state budget deficit. Yeah, I'm going to vote for that. Yeah, I mean, it's just 1.5%. They chip away at you, right? And it chips away at your soul, at yourself. And then after 10, 20, 30 years, you've lost yourself. That's happened in America a lot. Can't speak much for other countries because I haven't been in other countries. I can only read and talk to people that have been. But that's what happened in Eastern Europe almost 100 years ago. 100 years ago, when you look at the Bolshevik Revolution and stuff. Politics are downstream from culture. Politics are downstream from self. And that's a point that the Fountainhead made by not even alluding to actual politics in the novel. So start thinking about that. Are decisions you're making conditioning you to accept and conform? And if it is, rethink that decision. It could be about anything. There was a saying, and I'm sure anyone else that's familiar with the U.S. Navy, my family heavily involved with the U.S. Navy going back 3 generations, was, hey, don't ask why, say aye. No, forget that. Don't say aye. Question it. Push back. Do not conform. Isn't that what Gina Carano said? Like written on her arm in grease paint? Didn't it say "Do not conform"? Is that what it said? Well, that's good advice, but the thing is, you have to consistently apply it. If you look after yourself, if everyone out there looked after themselves responsibly, not selfishly, but responsibly and rationally, then the world would be a better place. The problem is that people don't do it responsibly or selflessly. They do it selfishly and irresponsibly. And then the other half do it for the quote-unquote greater good. And then you thus give power to those in charge. But if everyone out there said, hey, I'm going to look after myself rationally, the world would be a better place because you would be more prosperous, putting you in a position to then rationally and where you decide without any compulsion to help others where needed. Hopefully your family first, right? And friends first and people you love first and not strangers, especially like now. I'm going to take away 40% of your income and give it to 100 million other people. I don't even know how we live with that. Like, I try not to even think about it because it's like, work my ass off hard. 11, 12 hours a day. Dealing with the stress through the weekend of, oh no, next week I have to do this and that and that. And, you know, you're in the corporate world worrying about, am I going to get fired due to corporate politics? Hell, you could be a blue-collar worker. You're in the quarry, working in the 100-degree sun, right? Only for your paycheck to get robbed. So a bunch of other assholes that won't work, that are getting other benefits, can take your money. It erodes the soul. I've said this before, but my basic idea of ideal government is find out what anarchy is and back off a little bit. That's what it is. Let's see what you guys are saying here. Mike says, so frightening, people in the West openly advocating for communism, getting support like Hassan in Second Thought. Yeah, and 10, 20 years ago, you never would have seen that, right? They told us you will never see that. Well, now you are seeing it because, again, bit by bit, bite by bite, it's conditioning. Top Cappy is worth checking out. Thanks. Stezo for Life says, surprise daylight saving stream. Yes, this is hard to Starboard radio. Hopefully I'll be able to do these every so often when time allows. You can go back and listen to it as you're driving, shopping, cleaning house, whatever. King Chris is with us. Gabriel Knight says, this country was settled to escape what was basically cancel culture back then and separated from Britain because of taxes. Look where we are now. Exactly, and it's largely happened in the last 100 years, if you really look at things. Look at the presidents from 1900 on. And who, how, and when these things happened. But again, the Fountainhead. 1943 pretty much has cancel culture. The whole concept of it. And again, it's not because, hey, look, Howard Rourke is a Republican. We're going to cancel him. No, it's because he was a nonconformist that the newspaper column writer in the story tried to cancel him. It was all an analogy and brilliantly done because the book would be accessible to anyone and they wouldn't get turned off by it. And it's like, whoa, I agree with that. Well, guess what? Which side do you vote for? It's the side that perpetuates that kind of behavior, probably. Yeah, exactly. Woodrow Wilson. So again, guys, individuality versus conformity. Self-determination versus collectivism. Diametrically opposed opinions. I want to go way back up here because I forgot to address this. And I said this more or less on Friday on the spacing. Can't compromise with those who want us dead. Exactly. It's like, hey, here are my politics. I own this property. I pay for it. I pay for the services I use, the goods I buy. Leave me alone. But the people on the other side are, don't leave me alone. I want to be harassed by the government. I want to be taxed. I want to give my money so that, people that have crossed the border, have been flown into the country so they don't have to cross the border, will get my money because I'm a good person. Those are diametrically opposing opinions, and they can't be reconciled. And guess what? We're the right ones, because going back down to Gabriel Knight's point, this country was founded on the concept of individuality and freedom and liberty. That's all there is to it. So I want you guys to read The Fountainhead or see the movie with Gary Cooper. And make sure you tell Zack Snyder not to make the movie, because he did say it about 8 years ago that he'd be interested in adapting it, because imagine what that would be like. Also watch 1984. I've got John Hurt on the thumbnail. And that book right there is just fantastic. And I don't care. You get the left out there trying to say, it's anti-authoritarian against conservatives. Dude, it's a total analogy of the USSR versus the free world. Big Brother, Airstrip 1. Check out that movie as well. It should be out there streaming somewhere. So there you go. On Hard to Starboard Radio, you've got two Alternative Factory recommendations, 1984 and The Fountainhead. Both the books and films. I'd go out there and see both guys. Yeah, that's the whole point. And oh my gosh, I'm glad you mentioned that, Melissa. They are control freaks, commies are. And that's going to be, I don't want to give away too much here, but that's going to be one of the key points behind my creative project. That's all I'm going to say for now, but I've got to get going on that. I'm going to work on it today. And it's not going to be in your face. It'll be smarter, kind of like The Fountainhead, what I just described. Not, in your face, I'm saying this anvilicious speech or anything like that. It'll be fun, adventurous, character-driven, drama-driven, comedy-driven, but still have a definite ideology behind it. And a wholesome and pure one as well. Babylon B made a joke about Hollywood making the new 1984 movie having Big Brother as the good guy. Yeah. Babylon B is great. Probably 95% of the time they're on point and funny. Big Brother saved our democracy. Hey, you know what they should have done? Democracy didn't die in darkness. That's what they should have done. But guys, we've been going for 45 minutes. This is Grounds of Expediency, Hard to Starboard Radio. Try and do this every so often. It's been fun. Had that thought on my mind. Self-determined, be an individual, be an anti-collectivist. And we'll see you guys next time. Have a great Sunday.
Is that legal?
I will make it legal.
Where do you get this bureaucratic bull.
You have all the character references of a politician.
Intelligence has nothing to do with politics.
This president is not above the law.
If the dirty air don't get you, the politicians will.
The last remnants of the old republic have been swept away.
These orders have forced us to declare independence.